Hello, everyone. This is Noah Gross. Today I'm joined by Rob Vaughn. He is on Twitter at RobertoVNCLE. I am on Twitter at Noah_Gross27. We are both writers for It's Pronounced Lajaway, and welcome into another It's Pronounced Lajaway podcast. We may or may not be joined by Stephanie Licio. Hopefully we will. She is an absolute trooper. I was talking to Rob about this before the podcast. If she does join, it is kind of a miracle because she's gone through a decent amount after the game today and trying to get home to be on this podcast. So we hope she can make it, but we understand if she cannot. So needless to say, today's game, incredibly frustrating, Rob. Just your first takeaway from it, how are you feeling after this? Because we easily could have won this series and honestly swept the series. Friday and today were kind of similar games that we kind of had. We had nice comebacks. Obviously, Saturday was a blowout, but I'm frustrated, but at the same time, we're either going to be close to first or in first place. So how are you feeling after today's game?
Well, I think it's a little bit dejected, to be honest. I mean, you go into Chicago and you lose the first game, and then you win 3 in a row to take 3 or 4 from the Sox. You beat Sale and Quintana, and you finally come home after a 6-3 road trip, Noah. And then you lay an egg Friday night. Like you said, you battle back and you lose a tough one you had a chance to win. And you come out yesterday and play a great game. The offense is in sync. Everything's rocking and rolling. And you really hope for them to come out today and take the series and kind of reestablish that home field advantage. And, again, they're just unable to do it. And it just seems to be a recurring trend.
It is incredibly frustrating, as is most things with this team. And correct me if I'm wrong here, but this division seems like the most wide open it's been in years right now. The Twins, yeah, they had a pretty miraculous, I don't want to say run last year because it was a pretty extended amount of time, but they had a pretty miraculous season last year that they finished so well on a team that had pretty much not much talent over the age of 24. Most of their talent's really young and not very experienced. Tigers are aging. I'm always fearful of the Tigers because they've always had our number. The Royals, that was my number one fear in the division, but they're so beat up that I don't know if they're my number one fear anymore. The White Sox, they were ahead of us, but if you just look at their roster, there's still plenty of holes, and a lot of guys have been overperforming, and they're still right where we are. So, I mean, this has to be one of the most wide open divisions in baseball, and right now it's something that we have to take advantage of. Do you agree?
No, I absolutely agree. I mean, everything's wide open. If you look at those top 4 teams, obviously – outside of Minnesota, who's basically losing to everybody except for us. Between coming in today, between the Tribe, the White Sox, the Royals, and Detroit, I mean, all 4 of those teams within 2.5 games of one another. And, it's a little early to start looking at standings. They do kind of use Memorial Day and then the 4th of July as benchmarks. But, I mean, when you look at the fact that the Tribe has been without arguably their best pitcher, if not one of their top pitchers in Carlos Carrasco for the vast majority of the season, and without, their best or second best offensive player in Brantley, and you look at where they're at, I mean, you kind of got to smile looking at being in first place given those 2 major injuries and just some of the inconsistencies. I mean, still hitting 180. I mean, we're at the end of May now. It's a little bit – it's not the early part of the season anymore, Noah.
Yeah, there is stuff to smile about, but it's just like I said before, it's very frustrating seeing where we could have been. We have players that are doing great. Obviously, I love what Kipnis and Lindor are doing up the middle. I love that. But then you just look around the diamond, and like you said, we don't have arguably our best hitter. Him and Brantley and Lindor are probably 1-2 right now as far as best hitters. If Brantley's fully healthy, that's yet to see. Many people thought Carrasco was our best pitcher last year, and coming into this year, he was definitely our best pitcher. At least I thought. So without 2 of those guys for the majority of the season, it is nice to see that we're in the position we are, especially considering guys like Lonnie Chisenhall, who had a superb year defensively this year. Not only does not have a home run and is not hitting very well, and that strikeout today is just eating at me. That's very frustrating. But his defense is subpar so far this season too, at least for his standards in right field. Yes, it was a small sample size last year, but he did do great. And look around the diamond, he's kind of his usual self, but he's just so frustrating in the clutch this year. And there's a bunch of guys around the diamond. Even Cody Anderson. Yes, he had one good start in Chicago, but like you said, there's just so many guys around the diamond that have been underperforming too, but we're still there. So just Rob, to finish off on this starting point here, are you happy with where we are, or are you just like frustrated just overall? Because like we've been saying, this could be much worse, but it seems like it could be a lot better too.
No, I'm pretty happy. I mean, to be in first place or within a half game of it after today, probably at this point, given those two major injuries, is pretty excellent. I think not excellent, but I'm very happy with it given the major injuries. Looking up and down the lineup right now today, outside of Brantley not being in there, today was Indians' typical lineup. Okay, look at those numbers. After today's game, Santana 230, Hitman 275, Lindor 316. Napoli 233, Jose Ramirez 304, Uribe 240, Holmes 180, Bird 243, Davis 242. I mean, outside of Jose Ramirez, no one is performing that great. I mean, Lindor's having a nice season, The power numbers are down a little bit, the stolen base numbers are up, but you look at those numbers and you say, wow, this team's second in the American League in runs scored. And then you look at those numbers and say, 8 out of 9 guys are capable of producing so much more.
And the offense is supposed to be the weakness too.
What's that?
The offense is supposed to be the weakness of the team. So if we can get that up and continue the pitching, this team could be very dangerous.
I mean, they're like a sneaky offense. Obviously, the great offensive strike there over that 6 or 7 day period where they just dominated Cincinnati and scored whatever it was, 42 runs. And, took it into Boston pretty well. It's a little misleading because you see these batting average, which is apparently quickly becoming an overrated stat because, you look at a guy like Gomes who's amongst the major league leaders and catchers for RBIs, but he's only hitting 180. So I just feel like there's so much upside. But like you said, going into the season, we didn't bank on the offense being the catalyst. We banked on great starting pitching, a solid bullpen, and scraping by with enough runs. And so far it's been pretty solid starting pitching, pretty solid offense, and very streaky bullpen, right?
Very, very streaky bullpen, and we will get to more of the bullpen later, but I want to touch on today's game a little bit. Clevenger, Mike Clevenger was a starter today. He, again, he struggled early, as he's done, but he showed some promise later on. I like his fastball, changeup, breaking ball. I love for him to add like 2 or 3 more miles an hour to his fastball, or just subtract 2 from his changeup. Obviously, easier said than done. But his fastball is sitting at about 91 today. His changeup is about 84, and his changeup has some nice late movement, which I like. But if we get some more separation between that, because the Orioles hitters, which are just big, powerful guys, were just sitting back, and they didn't have to fear a fastball being blown by them, and they could just, because that changeup and fastball separation was not enough to where they have to just kind of guess on some of the pitches, where some guys it's like 10, 11 miles an hour difference. Although his curveball is nice and slow, about 20 miles an hour different than his fastball. So I do like his pitches, but I think he needs to mix in some more breaking balls early in the count. He needs to be more confident in his pitches. Are you seeing anything in him where it's like promising, or is it just all downhill on your end as far as Clevenger?
Well, I think the velocity is decent. A lot of pitchers, young guys especially, will develop velocity over time. His breaking ball is very impressive. I mean, he struck out Machado on a really, really good slider. He's thrown a really good over the top curveball as well, like your typical 12-6 curve. Then he throws that slider in there, and those pitches, like you said, the curveball's coming in at 75 to 78, 80, and then the sliders 83, 84, right around the changeup. But I mean, regardless of velocity, his command is atrocious. I mean, the number of first pitch balls today and 2-0 and 3-1 counts was just catastrophic. And look at his pitch count today. He ended up throwing 4 innings and somehow got to 89 pitches in 4 innings. He threw 48 strikes and 41 balls. So, I mean, to your point, the stuff is there. You'd like to see him get the velocity up a little bit. But the breaking pitches are excellent. His curveball is really, really good. I mean, he's got a plus curveball. But without that command, I think that he'll probably be sent down right when Carlos Carrasco comes back. And I mean, he had his chance, did he not? He got 3 starts.
Yeah, and I mean, the first one was against the Reds, which are a very subpar team. So he should have done well in that one. They were basically like a AAA team. And the thing with Clevenger is he doesn't really seem ready for big league pitching. He clearly, like you said, he has the stuff. His breaking ball is very solid, and his velocity is decent. I'll give you that. But he just, whether it's controlling the running game, attacking the hitters, or just being confident on the mound, he does not seem like he's a big league pitcher yet. He just seems like a kid who just got thrown out there who doesn't really understand how to be a pitcher, not a thrower, which he's been. I know that cliche is kind of overused, but you're seeing some of these things. And just one more question on Clevenger. Are you more comfortable having him or Anderson be in the rotation? Yes, Anderson did have one great start there versus Sox, which he just looked great because he was utilizing his curveball very well. But before that, he had been struggling a ton. So who are you more comfortable in? I'm probably more comfortable with Cody Anderson because I just have no confidence in Clevenger right now. He seriously needs some seasoning in AAA. But they both have potential, as we've seen. But do you prefer one over the other?
I was afraid you might ask me that question. No, I mean, I'm really glad they gave Clevenger a chance. Like you said, I think he needs some seasoning. One thing I thought was really weird was he never pitched out of the stretch. I mean, he came in and, right away, first batter, he's pitching like there's guys on base, and it just seems very odd for a starting pitcher. But beside the point, so definitely some fine-tuning to be done. At this point, I'd rather see Anderson because of his command. I think Anderson's, boogaboo this year so far has been the home run ball, which we didn't see quite as much last year, but he's given up a lot of home runs, on fastballs in the middle of the plate. But I'd rather see a pitcher with command that can take you deep into the games and strike people out, who has better command, who might give up the occasional home run, than a guy who's coming in just falling behind every hitter. And to be at nearly 90 pitches after 4 innings, just you're not ready yet, And that was the case with Clevenger today.
And I do like what I've seen from Anderson because I've always said from this year on, or seeing it from this year, is that his fastball and changeup are still very good pitches. It's just that you cannot succeed in this league being a 2-pitch pitcher unless you're coming out of the bullpen, and those 2 pitches are just unbelievable, like Cody Anderson's knuckle curve and his fastball. You need to mix in a 3rd pitch, and Cody Anderson was barely ever mixing in his curveball, and his curveball is good. I'm not sure why he wasn't throwing it, whether it's a confidence issue or just he didn't think it was the right spot for it. But if he does utilize that, he has a heavy fastball. It's usually hard to hit, and his changeup has some real nice movement late, and his curveball is nice. He needs to work on location a little bit. But as far as the other guys in the staff, I wanted to touch on this a little bit because Kluber, Salazar, Tomlin, I like what all of them I've done. Obviously, Carrasco would be in this conversation if he was healthy. But who do you think is the best pitcher on the staff right now? Not necessarily like for the rest of the season, but just like if you were to have one start in this next week, if all their arms were 100%, who would you want to start the game?
Well, I mean, I think if there were a playoff game tomorrow, the fake off of the 1-game playoff, I mean, it'd be hard to not go with Salazar so far this season. I mean, what Tomlin's done has been outstanding, He's really pitched deep in the games. He's given them great innings. He pitches so quickly. The team feels so confident with him on the mound. That's evident because they score runs for him, Yeah. Kluber's been really solid, and I'm a huge Kluber fan. I feel like, his 1-loss record is what most fans see, especially the common fan, so to speak. But Kluber's pitched pretty well this year. He had that one, atrocious outing in Houston. But outside of that, I mean, he's been very solid. I think he's right where he needs to be, and you got to feel good about him. But I mean, Salazar's been really good so far this year, and I think I'd be hard pressed to not call him, the best pitcher so far this year. The ERA is very solid right now at 2.39. I mean, his innings pitched, he's at 60 innings pitched, and 72 strikeouts. I mean, pretty phenomenal numbers. A WHIP of 1.14, pretty decent for a starting pitcher, but he's really matured, I think, Noah, and pitched a lot better with runners on base. A couple times yesterday, he gave off doubles to lead off the inning, and then that guy never advanced from second base. And in the past, Salazar would start walking people, and they would manufacture runs off of him. And he's so much more mature pitcher than he used to be.
Yeah, and that's something big that you just touched on right there, minimizing the damage and working out of trouble. If you give up a leadoff walk or leadoff double, yeah, it stinks, but somebody like Clevenger needs to learn this. It's not the end of the inning. It's not the end of the world. You can easily work out of it. And those three guys are all veterans that I'd be comfortable with pitching in a game like that. And I love what they're doing. It's just frustrating to see them and then like the 2 off days when it's like Bauer or Anderson or Clevenger, one of those three guys going where they just look like completely different guys on the mound. But I want to transition here to attendance. I know you want to talk about attendance, Rob, so I'll let you take this one.
Well, I just it's frustrating to me because you go into Chicago and you take 3 of 4 against the White Sox to be in the doorstep and now enter first place, which is great given the injuries we talked about. And they come home with this big series against a Baltimore team who's playing good baseball. Yeah. And by no means did they get the heart of the Orioles rotation, until today. And I feel like they laid an egg a little bit. They lost 2 games on Friday and Sunday that they could have won. And they had a big win on Saturday, which was great. They had good crowds out there this weekend, 25,000 plus on Friday and Saturday, and then it looked like about 18,000 today. And I want them to get that attendance up there so badly. Obviously a lot of excitement in Cleveland right now with the Cavs, as there should be. Yeah. But to see them constantly lagging behind and in the bottom 1 or 2 of the entire Major League Baseball in attendance, it just frustrates me so much. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, could you imagine if the Browns were either in first place or like a half game? Well, not a half game. It can't be a half game in the NFL, but like 1 game out of first place. Like I want to say like a
people
quarter.
Would be sitting on the roof of the stadium watching the game.
What was that?
People would be sitting on the roof of the stadium watching the game. They'd have to create extra seats.
People would go nuts. I mean, this Indians team, there's plenty to be excited about. I mean, all people have their excuses for not going to the game. But for the everyday fan that can make it to the game, there's really not a reason not to. I don't know if I said that right, but I think you get my point. The team's good. They have exciting young talent. Francisco Lindor, I think, has drawn a ton of fans by himself. Fans just absolutely gravitate to him and love him. So I agree with you in that fans should make it out to the game, but it is frustrating when seemingly all these big series like this, the Indians do lay an egg. Like if you remember the last few years, games like versus the Tigers where fans would come and show out. Stadium would be packed, and it was just a great environment, and the Indians would choke. It's just things like that really frustrate these fans. But all these fans that say, well, if the team's good, I'll come out to the game. Well, the Indians are good. The division's wide open, and they're either going to be first or close to it by the end of today. I'll give you a score update in that game later so we can be sure where the Indians will stand in the AL Central. But definitely is something that's frustrating. And I just wanted to get your opinion on this too. You talked about Machado a little bit. Do you think he's the best infielder in the game? Just really quickly, either him. For me, it's either him or Arenado. But I just want to hear who you have to think, because Machado was just unbelievable in this whole series.
Yeah, he really was, and how they could move him outside of shortstop when Hardy comes back is beyond me. I mean, he had 2 leaping catches, which both took away RBI hits, several diving stops. I mean, he was so solid at short. And granted, we're blessed with Lindor. I mean, Lindor's top 5, 6 defensive shortstops in baseball right now. But Machado was rock solid defensively at short. The only reason they ever put him at third was when they signed Hardy. He played well, and they said, let's put Machado at third, rather. But I think he's probably at short to stay now. And, I mean, offensively, what more can the guy do? I mean, he's a 5-tool player. And I don't know. I mean, the injury hurt him, put him off track a little bit. I mean, kind of a toss-up with him and Arenado, I guess, right now. I mean, they're both just having unbelievable seasons statistically, both offensively and defensively.
They are both studs, and it's just like every time he comes up to the plate, it's almost Miggy-esque where I'm just like frightened, and I'm just like, all right, do not give this guy anything to hit, even if it's like bases loaded or something. I just keep wanting to throw junk to him because he is such a good hitter. On Friday night, he was just bashing the ball everywhere. So he is a great young talent. But I do want to talk a little bit about here the big picture, as we talked about a little bit before the show, there is definitely some needs on this team. Most fans have been clamoring for a right-handed bat, but as we talked about earlier, the offense has shown signs of life, and especially with Brantley coming back, I think the offense will be a very solid lineup. If you look at the top 4 or 5, with let's just put Santana in the leadoff spot for now. So Santana, Kipnis, Lindor, Brantley, Napoli, Jose Ramirez has been doing great. Gomes, if he figures things out, and then Marlon Byrd, guys like that at the bottom of the lineup. I'm very comfortable with our lineup. Yes, I would like a right-handed power bat, but they don't grow on trees. You have to pay a lot for them. I love the Indians farm system, so I don't know how much I want to give up on them. But as we talked about earlier, the left-handed reliever, or just for me, it's a reliever in general, is a great area of need. Now, I don't know if you have anybody specific in mind, or if you just agree that reliever is like the right area of need, and who we could either like trade for one, or just why we should trade for a reliever in the first place.
Well, I mean, I think that there's two elements to this. Number one, I think the lefty's imperative. I mean, the Indians have gotten absolutely nothing out of their left-handed pitchers in the bullpen so far this year. I mean, Zach Crockett has digressed immensely. I mean, he was quite solid when he first came up. You know, you see this guy who looks like he's 8 years old. He goes out there and he's striking people out and inducing ground balls, and it's like, wow, maybe we got something here. And now this season, I mean, it seemed like lefties were hitting 500 off of him. I mean, he could not get anyone out. And then Detweiler, that experiment went well in spring training, and then he pitched very poorly to the point where he was designated for assignment and is no longer with the major league club. So, I mean, to be at this point, again, you know, sitting here 26-22, now a half game out of first place because it looks like Kansas City did win today. I mean, you can't complain too much, but I'd really like to see them get a left-handed reliever. I think it's probably going to happen later on because the parity and the wild cards and everything, there's a lot of teams still in it. If I can throw one name out there for you, it actually is a bat, and a guy that I've liked for a long time and whose production's dipped off a little bit, but the kind of guy that I could see the Indians getting, and that's Evan Longoria of Tampa Bay.
That would be a big name.
Well,
Wow.
we've needed a third baseman for a long time, and he's a really solid glove. He's a veteran. He's a right-handed bat. He's a really solid bat. He's a team player. And that's a team that, as we know, does not hold salary for a long time, and who also, you know, at 22-26, 7 games out of first place, looking up at the Yankees, the Blue Jays, the Orioles, and the Red Sox. You know, that's a team whose playoff hopes are dwindling by the minute, even in May, because they're in a tough division with a couple juggernauts in there. And I don't know, Noah. I predicted the Ubaldo Jimenez trade back when it mattered several years ago. My buddy's like, we would never get him. And I'm like, there's certain types of moves that the Indians will make when they will spend money and they will go out and get someone. And this is the type of guy that I think is attainable.
All right, Rob, I'll tell you what. I am a sucker for trade rumors, and you just got me crazy excited about Evan Longoria. I'm going to follow. If I hear anything about that, I'm just going to jump out of my seat because I absolutely want Evan Longoria. That'd be huge. Wow, it is tough for me to focus right now. I'm sorry. I get really excited about trade rumors, and anytime
I didn't read that anywhere. I didn't hear that anywhere. It's just I look up and down at rosters and players that could be available and teams that might be out of it, and in positions of need, I look at that and I'm like, that's the kind of guy who has a somewhat reasonable contract, who's digressed just a little bit where he's not a star anymore, but he's really solid, and I mean, he's a great glove. If I may, one of the things that you talk about is what's going to happen with Jose Ramirez. I mean, he's got to play every day now, right, Noah?
I agree. I mean, I was going to bring that up to you. I'd rather have Ramirez every day at third than Juan Uribe, as I'm sure most fans would. So if you brought in a guy like Longo, Lonnie's struggling immensely in right. Bird, he's up and down. I mean, I'd rather have Ramirez in right, but Ramirez is a switch hitter, so you don't necessarily need to platoon him. And I mean, I'd rather have Marlon Byrd than Rajai Davis, but Marlon Byrd can't play center field. The only guy that really can play center field on this roster right now, I think, is Rajai. Yes, they tried Lonnie there, but presuming everyone's healthy and Brantley comes back great and everything. I guess you have to move Jose to right, or if you brought in a guy like Longoria, it'd be a good problem to have too many of these guys, but I just kicking out a guy like Marlon Byrd would be tough for me because he's a right-handed power bat in air quotes, just powerful enough to be called a power bat in Cleveland because we don't have much power. But I don't know, that'd be a tough one. Where do you see Jose fitting in that?
Well, again, obviously, this is like we're jumping ahead a little bit, creating this scenario of picking up Evan Longoria. But if we did, we'd probably give up someone on the major league roster along with some minor league talent. But
yeah,
I don't think that question's answerable given so much that can happen with Brantley and his health. And I mean, even if they make a trade, I wouldn't never be shocked to see Santana be part of it. But I think that they've gotten to a point now that even when Brantley comes back, and by the way, I think Brantley is a little bit of an if. I mean, we all have this image in our head that when he does come back, that he's going to be Michael Brantley and he's going to hit 305 with,
some pop.
18 to 22 home runs and great production. And I'm at the point now where with the injury and the reoccurrence, I'm getting a little nervous about him. How about yourself?
I've been thinking the same way for a while. That's why I have been considering the idea of a right-handed bat, but Michael Brantley, he's just a robot. I'm torn on what to think about him because I'm like I said, like I'm a sucker for like homegrown talent too, and or not homegrown talent, excuse me, like talent on my own team, and I always believe in them more than I should. So I still can't picture any other Brantley than the guy that, like you said, hits over 300 with pop, hits the ball to all fields. And I think when he comes back, worst case scenario is he's like the Michael Brantley of like 2013, where he's like 275, 280 with a little less pop and still a gun in left field. So I think worst case scenario, he's still a solid player and we could use him whether it's 80% or 100%. So I think he'll be okay out there.
No, I know you want to talk about the lineup with the structure of the lineup and, Davis hitting leadoff one day and Santana the next day and then flip-flopping people just crazily this year for whatever reason. When Brantley comes back, what do you see like the top 6 or 7 in this lineup looking like? It's a very intriguing question.
Well, looking at Santana in the leadoff spot, there's really no reason why he shouldn't be. He gets on base, which is what you want from a leadoff hitter. The only he has pop, which is something that's great from a leadoff hitter. I love to have that. And the only bad thing about him is he is slow, obviously, but that's kind of something that's being phased out of the game right now slowly. Yes, the Indians do have more speed than they've had, but that's nice coming from the 9 hole with Davis usually. So I have like Santana there, but having him get one more at bat in games than he normally would have is something that's starting to irritate me because, as I talked about with you before the show, he is notorious for being not very clutch. And that's starting to get to me too. And there's points in games where it's something like guys on first and second with 2 outs or something where we need a hit. Yes, a walk would be nice, but a hit is so much better than a walk. And in some scenarios, obviously, a walk is not as good as a hit. And he'll walk in this scenario, and I would love to have somebody else that has a higher average but a lower OBP who can actually drive in runs there instead of just getting on base. So I like Santana in the meantime, but I've not really heard this brought up much, but I've always wanted Kipnis to be in the leadoff spot because he was a different guy when he was in the leadoff spot last year. And I do think there's a difference in approach and results when somebody has changed, whether it's first, third in the lineup, because I know Frankie actually handled it well when he got moved to third, but some young guys, if they're moved to third in the lineup, will try too hard and overswing a ton and act like a true 3-hitter and try to hit home runs when that's not them. So I think Kipnis, when he's in the 1 hole, is truly himself. He can slap the ball to all fields. He can steal bases if you need him to. So I think that's ideal to have somebody like Kipnis 1, Lindor 2, Brantley 3. That's if, like we said, that's a big if. Brantley 3 if he's fully healthy and he's Michael Brantley. Napoli 4, although he frustrates the heck out of me, even though he hits these big home runs. And I'd rather have Jose 5 and then maybe Carlos 6, and then the bottom of the lineup, whatever, Yan Gomes, Marlon Byrd, just a jumble of those kind of guys. But like the first 5 or 6, do you agree with me? Like, you like Kipnis there, or would you rather have Rajay or Carlos or one of those guys at the top?
Well, this isn't fun. I'm supposed to disagree on podcasts, but I actually have it exactly the same way as you.
Really?
I think they were at their strongest when Kipnis was hitting leadoff. I mean,
Thank God.
Lindor's better with the bat now than just about anybody. I mean, he's a switch hitter, which is great there in the 2-hole because it separates the lefties if you bat Brantley third, which is where he's going to bat when he comes back. But, I mean, I love Lindor hitting second. Gets more at bats. He can move the runners. He can bunt. He's had 11 stolen bases already this year. You got to keep that in mind too, you know.
Yeah, I think Lindor is an ideal 2-hitter, and if you keep your best hitters at the top of the lineup, that's always better than just getting the guys who can get on base, because the Indians are not a lineup that has a bunch of mashers. And I've always said this about Santana: he's great in a lineup that is a great lineup, if that makes any sense, because if he gets on base, that's great. If people can drive him in and hit the long ball and plug the gaps, the Indians are not that kind of team. They don't have that kind of power. So I think he's best utilized not getting as many at bats. That a guy that can drive the ball to the gaps is quick. Oh, Stephanie's with us. Okay, there we go.
Hi, sorry.
Hey, Stephanie. No, it's fine. We're just talking about some lineup construction. Rob and I agree that we'd rather have Kipnis lead off. This is presuming once Brantley gets back. I think we both agreed it was Kipnis, Lindor, Brantley, like Napoli, Jose Ramirez, 1 through 5. Do you have any input on the lineup construction? This is if Michael Brantley comes back and if he's fully healthy.
I don't know. This is a terrible thing to say, and I know we need his defense and everything, but I've had enough of Yan Gomes. I don't know where he could go, but I'd like him to go somewhere else. I don't know. Today was a very frustrating day after watching. They get to a point where they just sort of spun their wheels. I mean, you just need a fly ball. There's nobody out, and there's runners on second and third, and he did the same thing Friday night. I don't know.
Yeah. I'm happy you said that about Yan Gomes, because believe it or not, I almost tweeted out, is it crazy to think that I want Chris Gimenez catching every day instead of Yan Gomes? Now, Chris Gimenez he's Chris Gimenez, and he's been on a bunch of minor league teams for a reason, but pitchers do seem to like him for some reason, and I love his pitch framing just from like a fan's perspective. He seems to catch the ball very firmly. I love what he does with his glove, and he's been hitting like not Chris Gimenez. So is that crazy to think? Rob, I'll start with you there.
Frankly, yes. I mean, I'll just be honest. I have to eat dinner at some point tonight, and I might lose my appetite if I picture Gimenez as our everyday catcher. I share Stephanie's frustration greatly, because Gomes' batting average is becoming a significant concern. His run production's been good, but I think the overall theme is that Francona, he falls in love with veterans. He was the same way in Boston. He falls in love with veterans, and he locks them into places. And it's at the point now where Gomes needs to step down in the order. He should be batting 8th. If you're going to play him, he should be batting 8th, because in key moments today, like Stephanie alluded to, he's performed very poorly, and that's troublesome. One more quick stat on Santana that worries me if we do continue to battle leadoff. He's now 8 for 49 against left-handed pitching with 1 double and no home runs. That 167 average against lefties is not going to cut it.
I think they mostly, last time I checked, I have not checked in the last week, but he had only been starting against right-handed pitching, which was leading off against right-handed pitching. So that is the one good thing. They haven't had him leading off against lefties yet that I know of.
I think you're right. I think they've kind of had that like non-verbal platoon in place.
Yes.
Where they're hitting Raji Davis against the left-handers out of leadoff spot, which has worked splendidly in the last 3 weeks. And then, like you said, Stephanie, hitting Santana leadoff against the righties. But you just wonder how much changes when Brantley comes back.
Right.
And something I wanted to touch on here, Rob, we were talking about trading for like a reliever or right-handed bat a little earlier. I'm just looking at the AAA roster right now, and I've not got a chance to see Columbus games. I've seen pretty far away, but there's some guys that I like. Obviously, like Sean Armstrong. I think he was up at the end of the year last year with the Indians. He has a 2.5 ERA this year. Do the bullpen's not as strong with Columbus as it was last year, but do you see, like, Stephanie, I'll start with you on this one. Do you see Tito or the front office being like a little too hesitant to bring up young guys, whether it's like, I don't want to say, I heard this the other day, Frazier jumping up all the way from Double A to the majors just to bring a spark to the team. I don't agree with that one, but do you see them taking too long with some of these guys, whether it be Naquin, like just afraid to bring him up and send one of these veterans down and or actually not send them down, but just release them? Or
Right.
are you comfortable with just like keeping the veterans on the roster and letting these young guys develop slowly?
I think what's interesting is the Indians, and Francona included, seem to pre-mark certain people. Like, they seem to not have a lot of faith in Naquin. They seem to not be that high on Naquin. I've always kind of gotten that impression. And I think there's guys they're high on and guys they're not high on. And they're not very quick to move the guys who they're not that high on up to the majors. And I think in some respects, a lot of smaller market teams are being more cautious with bringing up people, to stall people's service clocks and stuff. But I do think the Indians aren't quite as bad as some teams. I know I follow the Pirates some, and I talk to some of their fans, and they get very, very frustrated that Tyler Glasnow is still in AAA. There's other teams where there's guys who are beyond ready that should be there, where the Indians, they stalled a little with Lindor, but they didn't really hesitate to let Naquin start the season. They didn't hesitate to bring Clevenger up when they needed to. I don't know. I feel like for some reason I like Armstrong, but I feel like they're not in love with him or something. Like, they've got doubts somehow, some way that there's something there they feel he needs to stay in AAA for. But I normally would say, hey, let's bring up, youth and go with the players that are younger. But I think they're also a little scared of sending people down that are veterans that would then have to pass through waivers. I know they are really pleased with Michael Martinez. I mean, he's Michael Martinez, but, he's probably going to be claimed if they designate him for assignment. So I feel like he's there for a while because they need him and they like his versatility. And I feel like they are a little bit more hesitant to do that because they know once they do that, they can't stash these guys at AAA. Someone's probably going to claim them.
Rob?
Well, I think, it's from a fan perspective, you mentioned Frazier. It'd be a lot of fun to see him, but just knowing the organization and, like Stephanie alluded to, not wanting to start their service time, I don't think there's any way at all that we're going to see Frazier this year. And personally, the way that Tyler Naquin performed so well, I'd much rather see them bring Naquin back before they went with Frazier. But I feel two things. Number one, they need to make some changes internally. Otero has been great. Otero pitched great today. He's been really, really solid out of the bullpen. In my opinion, he should be surpassing McAllister. He should be surpassing Jabba Chamberlain, and probably be put in a lot more key situations. I mean, we're at the end of May now, and the guy's got an ERA like in the 0.9 range. So that's one thing. But I do feel like if they stay competitive and they're within 2 or 3 games of first place as the season winds on, any holes in the roster you're going to see filled externally because they're going to want to bring in proven talent and proven veterans. And I truly think that that's where Antonetti and the Dolans are going to surprise us this year, is that they do have the flexibility, and if the team is competing, they will make a move or two.
One thing was just going to say one thing that makes me think of this is when they mentioned Nick Castellanos from the Tigers, how he's kind of having a breakout year, and that maybe they brought him up a little too soon. And that is a worry with a young guy. You bring him into a contending team, a pressure situation. Are you going to stunt his development or cause some issues because he probably should have waited another year or two before he's there?
But with every story like that, there's a guy that you keep down too long.
Right.
I don't want to say Lindor last year because we didn't. I don't think that he would have changed the outcome of the season at all, like as if we'd have made the playoffs. But these stories will not get as much like publicity. But there's a guy that has an immense amount of talent, like a Lindor, that is kept down for, let's say, 1 or 2 more months, that the Indians were like 1 or 2 games out of the playoffs, something like that. So I definitely understand your line of thinking there. And I'm sorry, Stephanie, that we have to cut this one off, but like this one's already been pretty long, and we've got that stuff to do anyway. Today I had Rob Vaughn join me today. Rob, thank you for coming on. He's a writer for IPL. He's on Twitter at Roberto V and CLE, so follow him there. I'm Noah Gross on Twitter at Noah_Gross27. I'm also a writer for IPL. And Stephanie, I don't have your Twitter stuff, so you can plug your Twitters, and you're the co-owner of IPL, so
Yeah, it's just my name, Stephanie
Twitter.
Liscio, at Stephanie Liscio, all one word, pretty easy.
All right, so follow all of us on Twitter, and hopefully the Indians can stop being so frustrating. Carrasco hopefully comes back this next week, and we'll see how things go. Big week coming up, so hopefully when we come back to you, the Indians will be easily in first place, not just hanging on by a thread or maybe a half game out. So that's all for today. Thank you for listening.